Hey, Aaron, good to see you. Grizel, good to see you. I'm so happy y'all can make it. Yeah, we had to make a platform switch because Riverside really it dropped the ball, y'all. It dropped it. Um, and then I heard some of you had issues as well accessing Riverside anyways, and so I was like, this might be a time to try something different. And so hopefully StreamYard pulls through for us, not just today, but for other webinars. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds. We're gonna this is gonna be really, really fun. We're diving into some very practical and meaty things today when it comes to automating AI, and having AI kind of step into our business as more of a team member, not just one-off automations. Hey, Rhonda, I like all y'all just coming into the chat. Okay, can y'all hear the mowers at all in the background? I don't know why, but my lawn care and maintenance seems to coincide almost with every webinar I do. Of course, that's just how life goes. Okay, so you can't hear it. That's good. Okay, great. Hey, Molly. Good. Well, that makes me feel better. Okay. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. We're going to dive into the thick of it today because the last two sessions have been a lot more on the strategy, the high level, what does it mean to onboard somebody into or really onboard AI into our business, and kind of begin to paint that role, which is really having clarity on what is the ask. The same way when we hire a person, the question is, what are they going to do? And we can come up with a job description and a role, but I think sometimes we often get stuck when it comes to defining the role. And the irony with artificial intelligence is that it needs a lot of assistance to figure out what to do the right way. I like to think of it more of assistive intelligence. And for now, that's where the tech is still. So if we treat it like that, we know that we have to do a lot of hand holding with it to make sure it does what it needs to do. But the good thing is the hand holding, it can be a little set it and forget it. And so today we're going to talk about what does it mean to really take something like our meeting transcripts and all the different things that come out of those and begin to kind of delegate that back into the hands of AI and let it own more of handling those transcripts and all the work that comes out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's share. Thank you. Can we see? Let me see. There we go. Is everybody having an okay time seeing my screen? Let me know in the chat. I know we got to give our tech jobs because we pay them like they have them. Sometimes they don't work as hard as they should. So we do. Let me know if you can see my screen in the chat. Perfect. It looks really small to me from there. So I think I'm going to try and make this better. And as much as I love branding, I think my logo is in the way. Okay, let's remove that. All right, so let's talk about meeting workflows. We will get into a demo at the end, bearing that there's time, and I really do want to show you all the practical side of this. Let's talk about all the things, because I have heard so many questions about meetings and transcripts, and I guess it makes sense. It didn't click at first when I was talking about agents and building automations and delegating more to AI, but it makes so much sense because the meetings and the people, well, first of all, we're service providers, people who we're serving. And a natural byproduct of working with people is conversation and meeting and discussion. And the work seems to come out of the meetings. And I don't know if you've ever been in a place where meetings beget meetings, which beget work, but somehow, whatever, that's like a different problem. But you get what I mean. Meetings kind of sit at the heart of a lot of what we do. And so that looks like, I think, a very simple flow here that I have on the left for us, which is we generally attend a meeting, right? So we're going to go top to bottom on the left side here before we get into all the other good stuff. We generally attend a meeting, and then a lot of us have AI note takers at this point. So we're using some form of automation to capture the transcript and the notes from that meeting. And then if you're using a note taker that is geared for business or teams, then it will often pull action items for you. And then we draft follow-up emails as needed, and it can be emails and other things, but we tend to draft those follow-ups. And we can automate them, and it might be manual. And I think this rings true for a lot of what we're doing with our notes when it comes to meetings. And so I'll recap that. We show up at the meeting, we capture those notes and transcripts, We end up having these action items that we hopefully track. And then usually there's some form of follow-up with those meetings. But I want us to rethink our meeting flows through customer journeys. And I'll explain why. Hopefully it becomes obvious too as we take this little detour. So let's say we have a meeting. We show up at a meeting. And, okay, great. We show up at a meeting and we get those notes and transcripts. However we get them, manual, automated, doesn't really matter. Let's just say we get them. But we have meetings at different points in our engagements with people. We meet with people when early on in marketing, particularly if we do webinars, where we don't really know everyone on the call. Or even if we know everyone on the call, they don't know about us. They don't know in depth about our product. They don't understand the solution that we provide. And so they're kind of trying to get to know us, honestly. And one of the things that happens on those calls is there's lots of Q&A and there's engagement in the chat. And so that is a moment where we're in this group meeting setting. And not only do we have a transcript, but we have all this rich information and the dialogue about what's going on. That could be something that's really helpful to get and capture. When we are in the consideration phase with our customers and clients, that looks like sales calls sometimes, right? They're considering, from their perspective, they're considering how they're going to work with us. And that looks like some form of a pitch, right? And so those sales calls in and of themselves generate a lot of information for us. We have a decision. So when they're deciding whether or not they actually want to work with us, that has more to do with us, pitching or really negotiating those contracts, sending over payment and closing that. That could look like a dedicated call for negotiation. And so what that means is those transcripts are pretty helpful, because if I send somebody a pitch, we get on a call and we talk things through, those decisions need to be captured somehow. Usually that means a revision to the contract. It might not really even be so much of a litigious thing where we need to make a revision to the contract, but maybe the team needs to be aware that we might be handling this project differently. And so whether we're going to review the contracts, draft them with AI, or we're going to make people aware of certain things around this particular project, right? That's an insight that's really helpful to capture at that phase of a journey. Let's look at engagement. And so I added engagement here to wiggle in the actual delivery part of the customer journey. And when we are engaged, or when really that customer or client is engaged with us, we all do different things to serve our audience and our clients, right? And one of the common things I find is that we have a kickoff meeting or some sort of project plan. And those calls are often where we are formalizing our relationship with our client. And really, it's the DTR, right? Defining the relationship and how this is going to work. We're putting dates on the calendar. They're asking more questions. We're finding out that maybe we need other people to be part of the project. There's lots of things going on in these kickoff meetings. And so naturally, there's lots of information to capture, right? And they impact the project plan. Something that's very interesting about these meetings that I find is that if you are already automating your business or using automation for project management, you might have a project management tool that has a template. This is every time I work with a client for this type of project, these are the tasks that we have, and this is who it's assigned to. But I find sometimes in really dynamic businesses where what you do isn't exactly the same for every single person, who does what and how they do it could change. And those decisions are often impacted by these calls, right? And so what you could do with AI, and I think this misses us sometimes, is that yes, we can use automation to clone templates and start things. But with AI, we can intelligently go back and update what the templates were, right? And so we can say, you know what? Well, we said we do one step at step 3, but now we have to switch it and do it at step 2 because the client's calendar has shifted, right? We could actually have AI come in and start to modify our project management tools to keep it up to date with decisions being made on calls. And then another thing that happens during the engagement phase with our clients is customer feedback and testimonials. This one is something that we often hold off to the end of an engagement. But in truth, what I find is that my clients, they say a number of things that could be considered constructive feedback, critical feedback, and a lot of praise. There's lots of good feedback that's happening, testimonial-worthy quotes that are happening on these calls. And so maybe instead of waiting to the end of an engagement to get that feedback, you could be capturing them. You could be capturing these tidbits. Also, if you have the transcript anyway, AI could be extremely helpful in listening to those, taking those transcripts and noting things around customer and client sentiment and needs as well. I think sometimes with feedback, there's often a negative connotation. But what I found through, a lot of mistakes in my day is that if you listen early on, people are communicating. And sometimes it's hard to keep your ear to the ground when there's other things going on. So this is one way I find that AI is really helpful because it doesn't normally come with a lot of my baggage and all the things on my calendar, right? AI just normally shows up and is ready to work. And so when I give it that transcript, it might be better at gauging sentiment over time, right? If we're keeping track of those quotes, I can go back later and say, what shifted that I might be missing, as well as finding those testimonials. So that's something that we can consider. And then, of course, once we move to the end of our cycle with a customer, we move on to advocacy or loyalty and referrals. This is where we traditionally go and look at our conversations or try and book new meetings to get those testimonials. And so you can do that and have your AI come in at the end of the day and help you process that and even draft some of that copy or a case study, which I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you have come up with a call script before, and I think sometimes our call scripts end up becoming intake forms and questions. But what I found is that if you take your call script and you stick to it generally, it doesn't have to be word for word, but you stick to it generally and you give it back to an AI when you give it the transcript, it will it's almost like it fills out a form for you and the customer. It just does it really, really well. So that's great for calls when you have a format to get this information for your case studies, because it just writes itself. If you have a template for this is the call and this is how it goes, this is the format for my case studies, and this is the transcript. It's amazing. It's super, super amazing. But then, of course, if you are collecting these quotes along the way, then you also then have a whole bank of quotes that you can use to shape the testimonials and case studies as well. And so this is I'm gonna take a break to go back to the chat and see what's going on in there. But these are just some of the ways that we can begin to pull information out of these meetings and transcripts, that if we really look at it across the journey or our relationship with our customers and clients, to say, okay, at different stages, what are the different things I'm doing in my business that happen to be captured or almost like witnessed by these transcripts in these meetings? I see Kronda's a comment, nice diagram. Yes, Kronda put me on a puzzle, y'all. This app is called Puzzle, and it's not a normal diagramming software. It's definitely not. I made the mistake of thinking that and wasted a lot of time. It is not. And you're going to see in the next diagram why it's not normal and why it's awesome. So I have loved this. And yes, I'm finally in Puzzle and I'm loving this. So in the chat, are there any, after kind of talking through this at a high level, are there things that you didn't realize you could be pulling from your transcripts and from your meeting notes? What are the little nuggets of gold that you might have considered you could be pulling from them, particularly with automation and AI? As we sit and think about that, I'm going to move on to talk about the next part, which is, okay, so in theory, we can pull a lot of things, but let's talk about the how, logistically. How does that really happen? And so we're going to move on to the next one. So we're going to look at the consideration example I gave, the idea of pitching a sales call, or doing a sales call and doing a pitch, because, that's something that I think most of us do on this call right now. And it looks something like this for me. And I've went through and put in the different apps that I use, so this starts to look a bit more real. I attend a discovery call, right? And then I have Circle Back as my note taker come in and capture the transcript and notes. I do a little bit extra. I make sure that I get my transcripts and I save them directly to Google Drive. What I don't have in here is that I always do a backup to my computer as well. So there's two versions of it, because one day I used AI a lot. And one day I wasn't able to get my transcript and it really jacked up my day. So I said, you know what? I think I want to have my own backup and copy of those things. And then I also save my action items to Notion. Now, I know Circle Back has a direct integration, and some of these things can be super, super helpful. But I like to tweak these things a little bit. Right? I don't think every action item that Circle Back thinks is an action item is one to me. So in my automations, I get to be a bit more picky and say, what are the things I really want to fill up my task calendar? And so I do that there. And then I look, is a follow-up even needed, right? And this part is a new one for me that I'm building out. I've built out for others. But again, as my business has matured, I've realized One, everything doesn't need an email draft. And two, there's only certain things, only certain types of conversations that I think I can reliably trust in AI to determine what to say, right? And so this is fun that I'm now starting to build this out for myself. But I ask myself, is a follow-up needed? And if it's yes, and it's a short consult, then that's really easy. I can have AI draft that email and send a link. But something that I like to do, and some of you might feel this as well, if you sell your time for coaching or consulting in a way that is very customer guided, right? So you're more so an advisor and a coach on those calls. You're not really promising a concrete deliverable. When somebody gets to that checkout page, it might seem odd. I noticed that sometimes I would lose people because they couldn't remember like why they were paying for this time. And so what I found that AI is helpful in doing is that it can take the notes from the meeting, take that transcript, and help me contextualize that email to pull the things I said out of the call and then go back and say, hey, this is why we're booking this time slot, by the way, because it's a lot more complicated to create a custom link for every single client that has a custom, like a pretty page and a custom description. And it's like, that just slows things down. Whereas it's much more consistent for me and the tools to just pull that out of the transcript and put that excerpt into the email. Now, I do put in some steps personally where I get to review what it says and I work on it because it's not perfect yet. But I do like to add that touch. So that way somebody remembers, oh yeah, this is why we're scheduling this time away, right? And so then that's when we send that email. Maybe it's a retainer client. This looks a little bit different for some of my retainers. I might need to get their contract information. Now, if I had a super robust CRM in my business, then this might look different, but I don't. And so what I realized is that I already have a wealth of information actually from people if they go through my systems, which looks like booking time on my calendar. If you're using any calendaring tool, people go in and they put in their contact information. If you add questions to that intake form, you actually have some pretty good data that you can use AI to do research on. So for instance, if I start to ask people every single time they fill out a discovery call form, what is your website? What is one of your brand pages, right? What is your company name? That means I already have the information I need. So when I'm ready to then send a contract, I have it. A little fun tidbit is that depending on your automation tool, and here I have Relay app, you can use it to scrape somebody's website and actually find that their entity name. And you're like, well, why would we want that? Well, it's nice to not have to go back and forth and slow down sending over a contract. But two, most people put it in things like their terms of service and their privacy policy. It's there with their business address. And so depending on your services and what is needed for you to legitimately send a contract, you could actually have AI go through and do a good bit of research on someone to pull that information for you, send it for you to verify. And I like Relay app makes it really easy to send it to me so that way I can confirm it or fix it if it's wrong. And then say, okay, great, continue. Then let's go create that NDA. And so we can take that information I put together and then create the NDA and then send it to a redirect link for payment. And then at the end, I can send a confirmation email and say, hey, we sent you a contract. You can expect that in another email. When you're done, it's going to ask you to make payment and schedule our session, right? And so it is, if we take apart what we have here, this is really a good bit, maybe it's a little bit specific to me, fair. But I think it highlights what a lot of us do when we have these discovery calls that usually end in some form of a pitch or a lower ticket product or service that we're selling. I'm going to come back to the chat and see what we have going on in here. Mickey said, case studies and testimonials for sure. Yes, I think it is one of those things that are on the tail end. It is on the tail end of our services. And it's one of the harder things to mature, I think, particularly as we are micro businesses and solo. It's just hard to get into that rhythm and add that step and be consistent with it unless you've built systems around it. And then, of course, when you do those meetings and calls, there's all that follow-up work that we're talking about. And so, yeah, I can see how this would be extremely helpful with that. Catherine said, I still don't have things connected so that the task coming from the AI reader is telling my CRM what to tell me to do on the next sales call. Yes and no. I have mixed feelings about that. So I set up my Circle Back to do that. And Circle Back, one of the reasons why I switched to it for note taking is that it is one of the better note takers I found for pulling really accurate like notes. I mean, going the full length of the call. Some of them would give up like 30 minutes in, an hour in. I have long calls. And Circle Back was really good at getting a good digest of the whole call. I loved it. But I also found that I got really overwhelmed when I had an automatic integration because all the tasks showed up. And every task wasn't really something for me to do. Sometimes it misassigned something to someone, or it didn't realize contextually that I said something had already been done. So what I ended up with was an automation that was creating a lot of digital clutter that I just personally don't have the mental facilities to handle. It was just too much. And so that's why in my automation, what I did was instead of letting Circle Back fill up my task management in my CRM, I added an AI step that uses my own rules and my own prompt to determine whether or not it actually needs to be on my calendar. And that helped me kind of whittle things down and say, okay, I don't need the 30 things you think that happen on the call to be there. We're just going to add some more refinement, and then I can go through and fix things myself. So I wouldn't be too concerned if you don't have your stuff set up yet. I think it's actually a bit more important to one, I guess, see, but to be fair, I set it up so then I was able to see the problem. So it might be helpful to go ahead and set it up, but also it might be more meaningful for you and your team to say, okay, like what really matters? What really matters when we end certain calls? What are the things that really need to show up in the CRM? Because a lot of automated data can lead to digital junk and clutter very quickly anyways. Chronica said, I have the urge to put all my transcripts from a single client, to pull all my transcripts first from a single client and ask for a case study. Yeah, it's tempting. It's very, very tempting. I haven't figured out the way I want to attack case studies quite yet. But I think it's going to start the same way. Just go, here are my transcripts from these calls, and help me work through a case study. I think once I have a template, it'll be automated. Okay, all right. So let's move on to another diagram before we get to building something here. So this addresses, I think, one of the most common use cases, which is, again, picking apart our sales calls and looking at those transcripts. But let's look at something like a webinar, right? So this is marketing. This is the awareness phase. Again, you don't know that much about me. I might not know a bunch about you. And even if we know each other, maybe you're trying to figure out more about the things I do and whether or not there's alignment right now for us to work together, right? So people show up to webinars, and webinars, oddly enough, they're not as easily automated, or they want you to pay like 3 times the price to get your data in an automated way. It's interesting. So for here, you see that I have the little person icons, which means that these are pretty manual in my workflow. So we have a webinar, and then I have to go in and I manually log into the system, and I download that transcript, and it might have notes that I get. So it's captured by StreamYard, but then I go through and download it manually, and I put it into a Google Drive folder. And then once it's in that folder, I can do some things. Now, again, this isn't exactly like a one-on-one sales call, and so I like to do some things differently. I want to extract questions and answers and insights from the call. And the reason is because as I go through and go from not just different webinars, but different conversations, what I find is that my understanding of what people want and need isn't always right, if that makes sense. Like, I think we do a good bit of work when it comes to figuring out who our customer personas are and all this other stuff. I have lots of opinions on brand identity development for startups before you figure out what you're selling, because I wasted so much time. And it was helpful, but not really. And so what I find now is that if I had to go back 3 years of my business with AI, I would focus less on who I think my ideal customer is. And I would use AI to look at the transcript, same thing with the webinar, look at it and just tell me what people were really saying in a way that circumvents my own biases, if that makes sense, right? Because it's almost like when you're looking for like a blue marble, you miss all the other ones. You don't see them. You don't see them, And so that's why I love doing this with my transcripts from webinars and my calls, because it lets me understand what people are actually saying. What's the language they're using? If you're similar to me and you do something that's really, really niche, your language as a professional or a technician is going to be different than the language that other people use, particularly if you're serving people who are also not aware of the niche that you're in, which is often common for those of us who are consultants and bridging the gap, right? And so I love to go through and say, let's figure out how people actually communicated this. What did they say were their problems? What were the questions they asked? Even if I thought I answered them well, so it was asked twice, like clearly I need to improve, right? And so that's something I love to do there. And then this is where I apply frameworks. So we're going to get into it. Y'all are really getting a look into my head today, okay? Also, I'm a technologist and a consultant, which means we love frameworks. We love frameworks. And so whenever I approach marketing and sales, again, technologist, not necessarily marketing or sales specialist. So I've learned to rely on other people's frameworks. And so I've learned that when we engage with people, sometimes they are problem aware and they're pain aware. Really, they're in that phase where they're not quite sure what it is I'm offering them, but they're aware of what they need, if that makes sense. And so I have this here in case this is a lot of terminology that we're just throwing at you today. But when I start to apply this framework to my automations in my meeting notes, what that means is I can then have AI look at my transcripts and go, what did people say that indicated that they knew they had a problem, but they did not understand its root cause or urgency, right? I don't even have to, and I think this is one of the coolest things about AI. I don't have to build the skills of being a really good marketer or salesperson to hear that on the fly anymore. I can give that to AI and say, I need you to apply this lens to this information and analyze it for me. All I have to be aware of is to ask AI the question or to give it the instruction, which is so cool. And so I can have it look at my stuff now and go, yeah, go find where people indicated that they knew that they had a problem, but they didn't really understand the urgency. I can also ask it, hey, go and look where people, where they were actively seeking answers, but they weren't really connecting the dots. I think this is the practical way when I hear webinars or podcasts or people say, meet people where they are. I feel like this is the practical side of that. It's like, oh, well, I have to figure out where they are. And this is the framework that lets me do that. And so I do something similar for the other stages as well. When somebody is solution aware, so they know that they need a solution, and that's why they entered my world of things, but maybe they're not yet sure that I'm the right person for them, or that my service or product is the right solution for them, right? I can go back and tell AI, can you look at that transcript and see what people said that indicated that they might be solution aware, but not really convinced that I can help them? And then I figure that product aware content is really great for sales pages and checkout pages. And so now I can go from a webinar and say, did anybody say anything that might make sense to have on that page when people are actually making that buy decision? Is there anything there I can add to my world of content, my language, my glossary of things to speak the language that other people are speaking? So this is a good bit of information this morning. I'm going to pause. I'm very caffeinated, by the way. So I'm going to pause and come back to the chat to see if this is ringing any bells for y'all, and realizing that you can bring your own frameworks, your own methodologies into your workflows with AI and have it apply them for you, even when it comes to transcripts and meeting notes. I'll give it a couple seconds before we move over to the next bit here. And so when my AI does all this synthesis and is applying this framework, I mean, that's great, but what do we do with it? I just don't want it to live in my automation tool. I'm going to start turning it into content ideas, content or messaging ideas, right? Because I think also when we sit down to, and I use messaging intentionally, I'll come back to that. But when we sit down to come up with content ideas, sometimes I find I'm just shooting from the hip because now it's on my calendar where I need to create content and I don't know what to say. And as you can see, I like to speak grounded in something rather than just kind of coming up with it. Helps my creative process. And so if my ideas are already there, when I sit down, it's just really easy to go back and say, gosh, this is the trend that I'm seeing across my audience, across people that I'm talking to. If I apply this same automation to my client calls, right, I can pull those things out and go, okay, this is what people actually care about. So I'm going to speak to their problems, right? I'm going to go for anything my AI found that was problem and pain aware. If I'm trying to find someone who is ready to make a buying decision and actually needs what I do, right? You need the services I provide. You're just not sure that I'm here. Then I might go back and look for things that AI found that were solution aware, right? And so when I'm sitting there coming up with my content ideas, it's there. Now, the reason I mentioned messaging is because messaging lives offline, right? Messaging, I think, comes down to how we are talking about what we do and positioning ourselves. And so it's not just everything that has to be turned to a social post, but learning the way to articulate what I do. So when I show up in person with people, I can kind of correlate that to say, oh, you're saying that thing that someone else said, and it matches what that is. And I already have something prepared to actually meet you where you are, right? And so that's why I love creating this bank of stuff, because one, AI is helping me pull it. I can go back later and go, oh my gosh, like everything's here. I can look at this, I can process it, I can turn that into content. I can turn it into speaking pitch decks, right? And again, I don't have to sit in real time and magically try to rack my brain around a month or like a quarter's worth of conversations to ask myself, what do people care about? Because I've been building that information or that knowledge the whole time. That's what I love to do there. But, so far, what we've talked about looks more like automations with some AI steps. And, in truth, that's what AI and automation is. It's automation with AI steps. We haven't even gotten to the world where all of this is AI yet, right? And this is the best way to start. Take things that are normal workflows and automations and sprinkle AI processes into them. That works. But if I wanted to turn this process into one that's a bit more driven by the AI agent itself, then I might give it more responsibility. Because in this workflow, the trigger was me attending or hosting a webinar, right? The trigger was me. I was the one initiating the work that needed to be done. In this flow, it's the agent. The agent has a schedule. And on the third Friday of every month, it is the agent's job to go back into Notion and to go get those content ideas for the last 30 days. Then it will analyze the trends and shift in my clients or customers. And then it will write a report for me. Then it will save that report to Google Drive and notify me. Now, this is a process that has no, well, that definitely should not be a person icon. It has no interaction from a human. It's totally self-directed by the AI and by the automation that we have in place. The interaction that it gets from me are the prompts that I've already given it when I built it. I don't have to intervene at any point for it to do this. And so as we start to kind of imagine what happens when we take things that we might ordinarily say, well, now that I have this bucket of information here, I got to do something with it, because I feel like that's where more work gets created in my business, where I'm capturing things and then I got to do something with it. Then I have to make more capacity to do something with it. I don't have a system for it, right? It's like all this work, and then my brain gets filled with all these things I'm supposed to be doing and should be doing and coulda, shoulda, woulda. So if I'm going to have AI in my business anyway, I just don't want it to help me do work that I initiate. I want it to do things on its own. Remove more things from my to-do list. And this is the kind of workflow that helps me do that, right? Because in truth, I don't need a report every week. I don't need it every day on content ideas. That's overwhelming. But once a month to go through and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go through on the last 30 days, do those trends and reports for you, send it to you, and then put it in your Google Drive. So that way, whenever I'm free or have availability, then I can go back and look at that report when I'm ready to see what's going on. So this is where I take a normal automation and I add a second automation, and I really start to call it an agent, because all these automations are working together to form the role of an AI assistant that helps me do all the follow-up and all the follow-through on my meeting notes and my transcripts. Coming back into the chat, Mika said that she loves the problem, pain, solution, aware prompt. It really is. Honestly, I can't take credit for it. I've just sat in way too many trainings on those frameworks. And again, it was never my skill set or my expertise, honestly. And I always got stuck. And I was definitely in this content loop of like, course this, lead magnet this for a long time. Not all this information, nothing to do with it because they didn't have capacity to apply it. And so as I was going through and building automations, I realized, wait, this is where all those methods go, right? Because I don't have to be the one to hear it, synthesize it, turn that into, take that from information into skill in my own being, and then apply it. I can simply capture the information, delegate that to an AI, and it becomes its skill, and it does it for me. So now we're going to use a little bit of time we have left to see how far we can get with an automation. Now, like I mentioned, I don't know if everyone on the call hosts webinars, but I do know that most of us have these calls that we're doing. And so I want to start looking at what is a simple version of this? What's a simple version of this workflow if we pick up where we've captured a transcript and then have it kind of pick apart the call using AI and do some analysis? I'm going to toggle over to Relay app. Relay app is the automation software that I use whenever I'm building AI workflows, because hopefully you'll see why. Hopefully you'll see why. So what I mentioned before is that we have a folder in Google Drive that I save my transcripts to. And what I like to do, great, it's showing up, because demos live are always, they're fun. So I'm happy this is showing up. And over time, I have come to change the way I name my transcript files, also because I tried a number of note takers before I settled on one. As obsessive person with software as well. I did, and then I realized, gosh, I have all this data spread across all these tools, and I didn't think about how I would store it so that way it's consistent. And so I learned my lesson, even though I haven't switched from Circleback for a while now. I've been here. I learned my lesson, and so I like to name my transcript files with the year in this format, so that way it's perfectly ordered on my computer. And by the way, if you have numbers, you usually want to pad them with 0, so that way things stay in the right order all the time. And so that's why I have the 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day. I have the name of the call, and then I have the app that took the recording, if I can get it, and then the ID. I know this seems super technical, but it's really simple. When I go to Circleback, every meeting has a link. And so if I ever want to find anything in my Google Drive about a meeting, I just copy the link and take that ID out and search Google Drive. That's all the nerdiness that's happening there. So anything I create from a meeting transcript, it's just searchable by searching the URL to the meeting or the URL to the transcript from Circleback, or literally I just take the ID and anything I create from it, I can find it and it's related to it. And so I just like to do that because if I do it when I automate it, I don't have to remember how to find it later. So that's why it's named that way. That was not automatic from Circleback. I did that. And so I have my file here and we can see all that information is great. And so now that I have my webinar file, or I have my transcript, the first thing we might want to get is action items. So humor me. If you don't have an AI system that generates action items for you, then this might be helpful. And even if you do, you'll see how we can begin to get our custom action items as well. So what I want to do is I want to extract. Well, actually, maybe we want to classify first. So classify might be a better step to start with, because what type of meeting is this? That might even be helpful, especially if you have an automation that just dumps all your transcripts into one place. And depending on the type of call you're having, you might want to process it differently. And so I want to classify the contents of this transcript. And let's think of our instructions here. Well, I think we're going to have 2 types. I want to come away and understand whether or not this is a webinar and a sales call, webinar sales call, and then I think other, I'll put other there and delete that one. And I always like to come up with an other option to not force the AI to choose between the other 2. Because if you don't give it a way to bail out and say, I don't know, then it just kind of lies, no matter how much you give it instructions sometimes. And so I like to give it an other. Okay, and so I'm going to come up with instructions really quickly just to add some context. Okay, so I want you to look at the transcript and determine whether or not this is a sales call or a webinar or other. If it is a sales call, I will usually normally denote in a follow-up a link, some sort of payment. I'll mention a service. And so that helps you understand if it's a sales call, or it's named a discovery call. And webinars are a bit more obvious in their format. It's usually one-sided with a few guest speakers, if there are any guests at all. My sales calls tend to be 1-to-1 or like 1-to-2 at most. And so that should help you figure out which is which. Okay, great. I use a dictation app to make that easy for me. So notice that I didn't do anything special with that prompt. I just kind of gave it the thing. We could talk about prompt engineering. I don't think we need to worry about it. Let's just see what happens, Let's see how we go from here. So let's look at some edge cases too. With Relay, it's really easy to say, should a person review the AI output? It's just an option. So if I said I always want to review every single call, then yes, always. Or if the AI can't figure it out, then we can say, well, if any of the things that we told it to do, it can't do, then let me know so I can step in and make a choice for it. Or if it can't come up with a decent answer, it's just stuck at errors, then let me know, right? And so we can set those settings. I don't think we're going to need that for this. So let's just go ahead and see what we can do to test this. Okay, so we're able to rightfully determine that this is a sales call. Great, this is awesome. And so let's just focus on figuring out the sales flow. We have a couple more minutes here. So we want a path. We're going to say if this is a sales call, then we want to go down this first path, right? And then I'm just going to name it sales call so I can see that from the top. So if this is a sales call, we're going to go down this path. Now, what are the things that I might want to get from a sales call? One, I know, again, using AI, we're going to want to extract a number of things. So let's go back to our transcript. And I think, I want to be lazy. So we're going to use a different AI step here. We're going to use their prompt any model step. Here we go. And we want it to pull structured information out of the file, right out of that file. And I want it to auto-generate output. So before we get there, let's talk about what we want. So what I want out of this transcript are action items. I want to know what the action item is, a description of the item. So that's a short title. Probably shouldn't be any longer than 150 characters. So let's just keep it short title. Description as well. And then which speaker the action item should be assigned to. And so that I think that makes sense for the action items. I want a summary of what the client said that they needed, right? In their own words. And then I want a recap of what I recommended on the call. And then a breakdown of why I recommended it on the call as well, because I normally tell my clients why I'm advising them something. And then if there is if I say specifically, I'm going to send them a booking link or something like that, we want to call that a call to action. And that's just text that describes what it is I told them to expect from me and what action to take next. Okay, so this is not a very clean prompt. And so what I like to do is go into ChatGPT because, it's very spoken. This is how I normally talk at my computer. Say, hey, this is what I want to do. Then I go into ChatGPT on the side, which I do have pulled up in another window. And I'm going to paste what I have so you know what I'm doing. And then I say, make this a clean prompt. I'm going to go that way. Make it a clean prompt. And so it's working. I'm going to paste that back in here so you can see it. It's doing its thing. It came up with some extra rules here. That's so funny. Okay, so let me paste that. Okay, so it said action item needs to be max 5 words. That's not a thing, but I'm going to go with it. Sure, if we want to put something, 15 is fine. I think I might make the description longer. And yeah, I think that makes sense. And so now I think I want this to, we're going to have Relay app. So what I did here was come up with a prompt. I described what I wanted. And then in Relay app, it used AI again, there's lots of AI here, to actually break out the parts. So instead of just getting one big block of words, I could have Relay app break it into separate parts, which is really, really helpful if we were putting this into a CRM, right? If we have to store our action items a certain way, if we need to separate our call to action, even if I just wanted to format this as a really nice email, breaking this up makes this a lot easier to do that. So let's go ahead and test this now. Okay, I love this. I love this. And so this is a call with my pretend client, Jade, and it picked up these things correctly. The action item was for me to follow up with Jade with a kickoff to design her app that she wants to build. This is a description of it. This is correct. Great. The client verbiage. This is spot on. In this pretend conversation, Jade asserted that she wanted to automate her manual $500 brand audit into a $25 self-service tool. And I don't know if she used the word self-serve, but the AI picked it up correctly. It picked up my recommendation in that transcript I came up with. This is pretty decent for my rationale. Reduce wasted dev costs. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so that looks great. And I did say in the transcript that I would send a proposal. I'll send a proposal with a scheduling link, and that Jade's next steps would be to confirm participation and book the kickoff call. All right, and so I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to come back to the chat to see if anybody has any thoughts so far about what we're doing and what you're seeing. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I can come back and I can go back to this prompt and have it generate an email subject line, have it generate the email body. We can do all that. But just for sake of time, I'm going to show you what it's like to send an email to myself to say sales call breakdown instead of having this be client facing. And then we're going to take those bits and go ahead and just create a report. So action item. And we can format this pretty well here. So it's going to be an action item. And then I want the description, right? And so now that we've pulled out the data points, we can do whatever we want here to go ahead and make this fit what we need it to, right? And I'm very particular about this because, if I hired a human VA in my business to do this, they would follow my SOP. So why shouldn't AI? They would definitely follow my SOP. So why shouldn't AI, right? And so as we're going, I like to think about how I write my prompts really as SOPs. Okay. So that's a little bit of what I might send to myself. And then if I hit that right now, I'm going to get that email. And so we can test that. Hit test. Great. And I get that email sent to me. And so this is a very, very simple automation. And again, it will run anytime a transcript falls into that webinar folder for all the things I do for my demoed webinars here. It will run that AI step and go through and pull out all first it will make a decision about whether or not it's a sales call or, a group call or webinar. And then if it is a sales call, it will then say, okay, let's go ahead and pull the action items from the call, the description, right? The client needs, my recommendation, my rationale, the call to action. Relay has more features, and I didn't want to turn this into a Relay demo, but I could set this to go through and find every action item. Give me a list of them so I can put them all as individual tasks in my CRM, And so as we think about what we need from our meeting transcripts, there are a number of tools that will help us build our workflows to fit our custom needs. We are rounding out with a couple minutes here, so I want to go back for Q&A. And I'm going to pull this screen up as I come to the chat and look at your questions. So Kronda asked, we got some praise for the naming conventions. Yes, it took a while to learn. I danced between a number of different tools before I realized, okay, I could use different tools to do different things, but I got to have some rules to keep my whole world sane. And so, yeah, it took a while for me to come up with that one, which is funny, but it did. Hannah asked, how do you decide on Relay app versus N8N for agents? I chose Relay app because I know that these are automations I'm building for business users. That's it. When I am building semi-automated workflows or workflows where I want a business user to be able to maintain the automation themselves directly, I will normally reach for a Relay app. When I am trying to build things that are more sophisticated and are essentially more like apps, I will usually reach for N8N. In the world, in the space of different tools right now around automation and AI, I'm sure y'all might have noticed there's a lot of overlap. And sometimes it's really, really hard to choose. Where you saw me use Relay app, many of you could use Zapier, right? I just choose Relay app because it's crazy easy to move data between different apps. They do a lot of things that would be a step in Zapier. Relay just does for you automatically. It's really, really helpful. And so, if I don't want to think like a coder, then I'm going to pick a Relay app. That's what I pick. N8N is extremely helpful when I'm going from building automations that use AI to building automations that are AI, if that makes sense. So I'll explain it this way. When we use ChatGPT, we go into ChatGPT and we ask questions and we talk back and forth. N8N will let me essentially make my own custom GPT in an automation. So I can build my own chatbot in N8N, but also give it tools. So as I talk to it and say, hey, go search my email, it will figure out how to go search Gmail. I don't have to tell it like exactly how to build the search, which is really, really helpful if I'm making an assistant that is my inbox assistant. And its job is to watch every email that comes in and then figure out what it needs to do. And then, forward it to my bookkeeper, save it for later. At the end of the day, roll it up and give me a summary, right? Okay, that's fine. But if I also want to be able just to talk to it and say, hey, I need you to go and find these emails from Kronda and give me a summary of the emails she sent me in the last 3 weeks, I don't have to build an automation for that. All I need is one agent that can receive that prompt, that message, and then give it access to my Gmail, and it will figure out how to do it itself. And so when I'm trying to build things like that, that's when I reach for N8N because I get far more control. There's some other tools I use that are a bit more on the engineering side, but N8N is what I use when I want to build a more sophisticated agent that still allows a technical user who's not an engineer to go in, a builder, that's what I like to call them, just a builder, to go in and actually control things, right? Because then I have the extreme of I build the agents from scratch from code. And so that's a much different scope as well. And so it comes down to the client, the project, and the capabilities of the client. Because if they don't have an engineer on staff, and they don't have the budget to pay somebody to maintain it for them, I could be shooting them in the foot by using a more sophisticated tool stack. And so I will look to try and make it work with Relay or other tools that are made for business users, because it's just extremely important to me that teams can actually use their technology. And sometimes that means either simplifying your tech choices or simplifying what you do the way you do it. Unless we say we are willing to grow more technical capability within our team to maintain more sophisticated solutions. And so in my business, I use Relay for some things and I use N8N for others. And the way I make the decision now is that if it's something I'm going to have to stop at any moment and might have to fix or tweak. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yes, maybe so. Okay, we're still live, so I'll wrap it up. But yes, the more sophisticated it is and the more I want it to run and do more of my work for me, the smarter it is. I go with N8N. And the less sophisticated, but also the more likely it is that I'm going to have to touch it more often, I will put this into Relay because I don't have to put on my engineering hat, if that makes sense. So again, as a typical consultant, it all depends. It depends. All right, y'all. I think we are definitely at time. I'm going through and scanning these comments. Yes, yes, Chrono. This is why we get along. Good to see you, Jesse. If y'all have any questions, email me. You did see my email, blessing@sala.co. Send me your questions about your automations and using AI around your meeting transcripts and other things. Our next session will be in July, where we're going to kind of go a little bit backwards and say, okay, now that we went deep into one particular type of agent and one type of team member, what does it mean for us to kind of plan for AI to come into our whole business? And I do have an offer for this. I do. Let me see if I can share a link really quickly, because you can get on my wait list for my AI team blueprint. This is a group cohort, which is super, super cool. Let me see if I can add that there. There we go. Oh no, we don't want that to scroll. Why is that scrolling? You can't see that. Let me try that again. Where we're going to go through as a group and with a small cohort of you, and we're going to start to design your AI team roadmap. So what does it mean to go through and look at your business from different roles and perspectives? I think I need AI here, and I think I need an assistant here. And we're going to actually audit your systems, which is something that comes up a lot when I come in to do automation. Can your systems support the agents that you're trying to build? What are the knowledge or prompts you actually need to do this well and consistently? And so we start planning that. So that way, when you're done with this 3-day, it's like a 3-day intensive. When you're done with this, you and possibly your +1, so you can bring your systems builder, or if you're the business leader, right? Both of you come, and y'all will know what it is you need to do to actually get ready to build these agents and put them into your business. And I want to take that thoughtful approach to it, because yes, what we do is software and it's code and it's software and it's virtual. But the truth is, all because it's digital and virtual doesn't mean it lacks permanence. Right? When we start building heavy automations and delegating work of team members to systems, and technology, then we need it to work. We want to make sure we're designing the right things. And so that's what the blueprint does. We're going to have time to talk it through and design and figure out what makes sense for you to delegate to AI and what you need to do to get ready to do that in your business. All right, y'all, this is going to be a replay as well. So you're going to get that link at some point today. Thank y'all for joining me, and I can't wait to see you at the next session.